Time to butcher the solo. Ooh, that solo was tough. Never really learned it. But anyways, my interpretation of it, I'm putting the guitar on the ground because I'm really good at leaving the guitar stand way off camera. My name's Elton. Welcome to Elton's 15. And yeah, sorry about that guitar solo there in Out of Love Again off of Van Halen 2. Van Halen's second effort. And that's where chapter 10 picks up. So I'm recapping Alex Van Halen's book called Brothers, written about his brother Eddie Van Halen. And yeah, chapter 10 is where we're at for this recap. And so it's Van Halen 2. It's that album. It's that tour. That's the central focus of chapter 2. So they had just gotten home to Pasadena, finished the first world tour. There's not much time to be sitting around and kind of waiting for inspiration. They go right to work on that second album. Now, one thing that was facing Ed and Al right from the beginning of getting home was fame. They're experiencing it now. And so it's kind of likened to that of Elvis. They couldn't go to the store without people chasing after them or clamoring for sign this, sign that. They couldn't go grocery shopping. People just were always chasing them. And Al kind of underlined the idea of Ed, again, being very much a sensitive soul, saying when he projected into the idea of what fame would be, he never thought about this aspect of it. He was more like, I want to be famous in that people will know my music and like it, but the other trappings he wasn't about one bit. And so he never wanted to experience anything like that. And so with the newfound fame here, and they're doing really well, you know, this seems to be thematic in a few chapters here where Ed and Al's mom, Eugenia, is like, you guys need to get a business suit. You need to get real jobs. And so I figured I'd just read a clip here in chapter 10 regarding that. It took our parents some time to really register what was going on. To understand, everything had changed. My mother was focused on respectability and intellectual achievement as ever. So as you can imagine, there were aspects of her reputation that did not thrill her. She was telling us, wear a suit and even get a job. It's ironic that all the men in her life were in the only profession where you can get rich and famous is without ever owning a suit, let alone wearing one. And so I thought that was pretty, that was worth noting for sure. Their father, of course, was just thrilled. You know, they're achieving levels of success that only he could ever imagine, him being a professional musician the entire time. But their dad were also kind of aware that you could be a sensation and then completely drop off the map here. So you go from the top of the world to like you're back in a factory working, the midnight shift or something. And so it loomed large in their minds that they wanted to stay at this. They want to be professional musicians for their entire life. Now, as far as the aspect of fame, David Lee Roth was all about it. He's quoted in there from Al saying, I'm on as soon as I wake up. And so it's like he needed all this attention, that focus on him continuously. Al likened it to like, it was like he needed like water. He needed as a farmer's survival, having all this adulation. He liked being interviewed. He liked the press, as opposed to Ed and Al's disposition with all those other parts of being a famous musician. They didn't like interviews or having to answer questions continuously. So Dave, loving all that stuff, would, in interviews talk about himself, of course, talk about Van Halen. Al goes on to say he talked about bagpipes to tailpipes, anything in between. He was the consummate sort of like on character. There's another quote I want to sort of read from the book, and this is Al quoting Frank Zappa regarding the status of those that write rock journalists, or who are rock journalists who write in that frame to the musicians and to the readers. And this is on page 139, and it goes as such. Definition of rock journalism. This is according to Frank Zappa in Al's book, Brothers, about Eddie Van Halen. People who can't write, doing interviews with people who can't think in order to prepare articles for people who can't read. that itself is, I found some hilarity in that too, which is, neither here nor there, but I figured I'd include that. All Ed and Al ever wanted to do was just play music their entire life and continuously. Ed is quoted in Al's book as saying, I'm a musician and Dave is the rock star. Anyways, so as far as being a musician continuously, that seems to be thematic in the book, the integrity of being a musician, as opposed to all the other aspects of performance, but then stressing the fact that the performance and the showmanship are equal value here too. You're going to be presenting yourself as a great musician, but you need the other part to complete the picture in its totality. And again, this seems to be sort of a running theme throughout the book here. Al goes on to say that Dave, being sort of full of himself and his vanity and stuff, it all amounted in Al's mind to Dave's form of professionalism. He went on to say that Ed and Al, that would fight about Dave, would fight with Dave, and it was this continuous circuit of just friction. And that's kind of what seemed to fuel the band, this opposition to each other and always trying to one-upmanship and stuff. It's continuous. Anyway, so the first tour is done. They start recording Van Halen 2. They do it all within a 3-week period. The songs on Van Halen 2 are mostly culled from the original demo that they did from Warner Brothers, the stuff that didn't make the first album, but thankfully was still full of really great music. Van Halen 2 went on to sell 2 million records. And, Van Halen 1 went on to sell 2 million records at this point in 1978. And the band owed the record company $1 million. And so Al's questioning the formula there, like, we did really well and we still owe you $1 million. How does this work? And he went on to sort of joke that, hey, if we had sold 20 million of the albums, would we then owe $10 million or be $10 million in debt? That's something that predated this book. I remember this being a quote that Alex had said quite a while ago regarding how rigged things are within the music business when you first sign on as a new band. You're being taken advantage of wholeheartedly and continuously. Now, as far as advantages, trying to look at something here. Yes, I've got notes off screen here. Unfortunately, my camera's blocking it, and I need this as this is not all train of thought, obviously. So when you see me kind of looking in another direction, it's prompting my brain for stuff. And unfortunately, the way I set this up, the camera's right in front of page 2. So no cuts here. This is all live going out, taped. Weird. Anyways, all right. So they worked their butts off. The thing went platinum and still owed money. It's Al likens this to them losing their innocence. They paid for everything, of course. The stage, all the crew, the buses, all that stuff. And they couldn't even afford to buy homes at the end of the tour, which they were, I guess, hopeful for. So they were still living at home. And Al says the advantage of still living at home with Eddie was that he was able to hear Ed's creativity process happen. And so he'd be on one side of the house and Ed on the other side, and he'd hear Ed playing guitar and say, hey, that idea is great. Keep working on that one. And Al goes on to say, when you're in the creativity sort of mind, as far as a flow, you're not thinking what's good and what's bad, you're playing. And so he found that helpful, that at that point he was still able to kind of like throw in a few cents here and there, like, hey, good one, no, not so good one, chase after that idea. Anyways, with the little money that they did buy, they bought their father a boat. And the idea was to go out and have some fun fishing, drink some beers and stuff. And they did have a great time. It was a wooden boat, Al recalls. They had a 40 horsepower engine. And they did some other things too, like water skiing, much to Al's, further, this is an issue that happens through water skiing that follows Al for quite some time, and comes to a head in 1995 where he actually collapses. So the story is his drum tech and good friend Greg Emerson is driving the boat, and Al's water skiing behind it. And he loved it how the boat would kind of like make a quick turn, and being on water skis, being pulled by the rope, you would increase your speed by the way of that turn. And he loved that. And so he was doing that in one of the turns, and he fell hard. And if you fall into water wrong, it's like hitting concrete. And unbeknownst to Al, he said, thank goodness that the life jacket was doing its deal, because he woke up face up and being pulled out of the water, and he actually broke his neck. And it didn't heal correctly. And he said, when I was young, it just kind of bothered me, but it wasn't something that was stopping me. And then that persisted. And in 1995, before the Balance Tour actually started, he collapsed as a result of that injury back in 1978, early 79, which is, my goodness, the wear and tear on a body when you're a drummer, never mind having major injuries like that. Anyway, so Van Halen 2, 10 songs, 4 days, pretty good. They look to do no more than 3 or 4 attempts at a song, trying to keep like a vibe going. Because if you keep playing a song over and over and over going in the studio, trying to get it right, it loses something over time. You lose that spirit of it. And so they try to keep it within 3 or 4 takes. And he said they had success with it. They were much more comfortable. They recorded in the same studio. They had Don and Ted again. And with that comfortability factor, they just things just went a lot more smooth. And Ed and Al were much happier with the overall sonics of the album compared to the first album. Again, they revisited songs from that original demo. They had Beautiful Girls, which was Bring on the Girls, rewrote the lyrics a little bit there. And a song called Out of Love Again, which is the song that I opened the video with, and then butchered the solo. Sorry about that, all you Van Halen enthusiasts. I should have went and actually learned the solo. I was just trying to pull it from memory from a while ago. But anyways, neither here nor there. But he loves that solo. It's his favorite solo on Van Halen 2. Al's favorite solo from Eddie is Out of Love Again. Go check that out. It's really a special solo. I love attempting to play it. I should really learn it one day. Anyways, they also wrote Dance the Night Away, which was originally called Dance Lolita Dance. And there's a funny backstory to that, which I'm not going to share on the video. Check it out in the book. It's in chapter 10. There's a funny backstory to it. A little too suggestive for the means of this video here. But Al never really liked the song. And he said that the title was actually changed from Dance Lolita to Dance the Night Away. Eddie had suggested that the title change, and they went with it, and Al gives him props for that. The song Light Up the Sky from the album, one of my favorites, probably my favorite on that album, probably one of my favorite top 3 Van Halen songs of all time. Al said that's like the real Van Halen. That was the core, not Dance the Night Away. Dance the Night Away was too pop, he said. But it did well. It did well on the charts for them, and he said the ladies really liked it. But he felt Van Halen's like true identity was in songs like "Light Up the Sky." The photo shoot on the back of the album, if you ever see it, it has David Lee Roth with a cast. So when they were doing the photo shoots for the album, I guess Dave had done some sort of jump and landed wrong and cracked his foot, and Al said that lent itself atmospherically to them when they were recording the album, because one of the songs is called Somebody Get Me a Doctor. So David Lee Roth singing it with a cast on his foot and a cane of sorts. So I guess adding to the flavor at all. At this point, Ted Templeman is very happy with Dave's voice. If you can remember back when the first album, he wasn't even sure he wanted David Lee Roth singing for the band. So that was a big turnaround as far as, coming around to Dave's voice. As far as cover tunes, so the idea of cover tunes regarding Van Halen, Ted Templeman always thought you should have at least one on there. Because if you redo a song that was a hit, you're halfway there, was the philosophy. Al didn't like that, and I remember Ed giving interviews. He also didn't like that, but Dave and Ted were really for it. And for some reason, they agreed that "You're No Good," which was a Linda Ronstadt tune. Linda Ronstadt? Yeah, Linda Ronstadt's. I can't say that. Linda Ronstadt. She had done the song, but she also covered it too. But she had a hit with it, so they figured they'd do it. The Van Halen version sounds nothing like the original version by Linda. In fact, it's markedly different. The lyrics are the same, but musically way different. But Al didn't like that, and to this day he says he feels a sense of it says he's still irked by it, and that's his words there. He's irked by that song. So fast forward, the album's done. The last day of 1978, it's New Year's Eve. They're at Ted Templeman's house, which is a mansion, and Al says it's more like a lawyer's office, the way it was set up. But Ted had an acoustic guitar there, which Ed picked up, and Ed was playing these flourishes and pieces on it, and Ted was just floored by it. He goes, "My goodness, you play acoustic guitar too." And from that, Spanish Fly was born. So Spanish Fly is an unaccompanied acoustic guitar piece, sort of in the vein of like Eruption, which was an unaccompanied electric guitar piece that Eddie Van Halen ended up submitting for Van Halen 2. And so its genesis was the New Year's Eve party at Ted's house. So the second tour, which Al calls the first real tour because they're now headliners. And so they're responsible for everything. So they got a new tour bus. They have more things to think about, all the details. They look to play places that they knew would sell out, creating a scarcity. You know, what's better, he thought, is, someone trying to get a ticket for a Van Halen show and all the tickets are sold. And so that creates, like, I got to see this band. Everybody's bought tickets. I don't have one. And they look to play upon that idea of playing venues that would create that scarcity. As far as the idea of a Van Halen show, he felt was, it was the live experience. You're there, you're in a communal sweatbox, and it's ready to explode. You know, it's that of which he thinks of Van Halen, particularly at that stage of their career, as being that, that tinderbox, really. Saying that people necessarily didn't come to hear the songs, but in fact were there for the experience. And then it leads into why Van Halen never did much with MTV as far as live stuff's concerned. But I mean, in 1986, they released Live Without a Net, so that's kind of a little bit of a weird contradiction there. But he said it was very difficult to take a live show, and put it into a box for TV consumption. I think my computer went out behind me. That's weird. Anyways, got sidetracked there. That's one thing about Van Halen that's always kind of bothered me a little bit. The idea of really framing things. Okay, so you're live. The live experience is so massive with Van Halen that it won't fit in a TV and doesn't make much sense. Well, that's how all of the bands at the time were doing. So that's how people like me, in my upping, as I was getting older, and I liked Van Halen since like fourth grade. Anytime I got to see them was through TV, through video. And so not being able to see them in that capacity, I would never seen them at all until I was old enough to drive to a concert to see them. So, I think, I know the time's gone by and this is now a moot point, but I really wish they would have reconsidered that. Getting any Van Halen on tape live, whether video or otherwise, can never be a bad thing. I understand that they limited it for maybe that reason, but it really was a form of alienation. As a consumer, which sounds weird, but as a true fan of the band, having as much as I can get my hands on is really where it's at. It is. That's goes without saying. And I think Al may have understood that too from being a fan of Led Zeppelin. He said Zeppelin for everything and how limited Zeppelin put things up, but they seem to put out a little bit more than Van Halen did in terms of just overall stuff. It's, you want more from your band. But anyways, that's a weird side note. So Van Halen 2 goes on to be gold. after the first month, and after a couple months, it goes platinum, and they reach number 6 on Billboard. Well, right before the tour starts for Van Halen 2 album, Al started smoking again. He had gone to the doctor and got something diagnosed, and whatever the condition was, and again, I'm not going to go into detail here, trying to keep things clean for the video here. He approaches Eddie and says, give me a cigarette, and then Al starts up smoking again. He had quit smoking for the first tour to get in shape and really be his best. Anyways, he goes on at this point towards the end of chapter 10 talking about girls and the availability and the routine of it. And again, I won't go into detail with that. You can read that for yourself. But the interesting thing is Dave Lee Roth that time looking to take out paternity insurance. And that created such a buzz amongst the industry. This guy is trying to take out insurance in case, a fan ends up, with child. And it never ended up happening, but the legend grew from there, which was pretty funny. And he goes on to talk about David Lee Roth never getting married or having kids and, just seeming to be kind of alone in life with that, which is sad. But the Van Halen tour, they played to 100,000 people at one point at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. They were on the bill with Cheech and Chong, with Ted Nugent, Cheap Trick, and Aerosmith. And Aerosmith being a pretty hot band at the time, Van Halen looked to prank them. They bought like an old, well, maybe not old, it's old now, but not old then, yellow Volkswagen that they had parked out front. And the idea was throughout the show, they were going to say, can Aerosmith please move their yellow Volkswagen? Just kind of really ribbing the Aerosmith camp. And right before Van Halen was supposed to go on stage, they had rented a Sherman tank and they were going to crush the Volkswagen, yellow Volkswagen, which was supposed to be the vehicle of Aerosmith. And it sounded like a pretty good stunt. They had practiced it a few times and it went over really well without anybody around. This is behind the scenes stuff. And Aerosmith, the Aerosmith camp somehow got wind of it. And so they had ready to go, queued up video of planes blowing up the tank or a tank, which would just dissolve Van Halen's one-upmanship. So they didn't end up doing that. Playing the Forum was a big deal for Van Halen. It was a homecoming show, playing in front of mom and dad. And Eddie Van Halen said it was, one of the best thrills of his life to be able to play there. Now, that first time that they played there, while they were playing, their house was robbed and broken into. And they found out who did it. It was one of their cousins. Their mom, Eddie and Al's mom, had hired a cousin to come in and paint the place. Instead of painting the place, they kind of did a whole survey of it and stole all their gold records. They actually thought it was made out of gold, thought they could melt it down and that it was valuable. Anyways, gold records aren't really made out of gold, and I guess that cousin found out the hard way. But anyways, as far as that's concerned, that was like, okay, we need to get out of here. We're too famous. And as soon as they got a little bit more money, they then upgraded their house. They wanted to move away from where they would have to be subjected to this kind of stuff. And as soon as they started getting any real money in, they really looked to retire their mom and dad. And in retrospect, Al goes on to say they wish they hadn't retired their dad because in doing so, he became a little more complacent in life. He was spending more time at home, and it kind of robbed him of a sense of purpose. And looking back on it, Al said that probably was a big mistake. Their dad became increasingly unhappy just being at home, and they didn't understand at the time that wasn't such a good move. Anyways, so that's essentially how Chapter 10 ends for the most part. That's my recap of it. Thanks for tuning in. If you're this far, holy moly, whoa, thank you. My name's Elton. This is Elton's 15. Thanks again.